side by side versus toggling back and forth between the two. If you have a colleague, friends, or family who wasn't able to register, you can go ahead and send this URL to them right now. They can register at any point during the programming. And this live cast is actually broadcasted in real time on YouTube. So go ahead and go to YouTube and follow us there, and you can watch all of our programming. In addition to all of that, I just wanted to say that we wanted to thank our awesome official technology partner, Cisco WebEx. We appreciate them powering today's broadcast. So last but not least, I'm excited to bring on today's guest host. Her name is Kinsey Tamburino. She is the VP of East Coast Sales at Vevo. Welcome, Kinsey.
Hi.
There she is. It's
I'm glad this worked. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I am very excited to be emceeing. Today is my debut emceeing gig, but I'm really excited to be joining a great cast of industry leaders to talk about the future of TV. A little bit about myself. I'm the VP of East Coast Sales at Vevo, where I oversee the region and then also work nationally to develop and maintain a lot of our agency partnership deals that we work on. Like many of the brands that are present today, Vevo is definitely at the cross-section of media, entertainment, and technology. And with us being a global music television network, it really has transformed over the course of the last few years with the growth and adoption of television. So we're seeing it play out in our marketplace every day. We're really excited to be here today, me personally, to participate in today's discussion. So let me welcome the speakers. We have Jason Mcgowpin. He's a brand director for vitamin water at Coca-Cola. He's responsible for developing and executing growth plans for the brand, including content, connection, strategy, packaging architecture, product innovation, P&L management. So it sounds like a lot, probably a busy man. He has been at Coke for 7 years and worked on a number of the brands that in their portfolio. And joining him is a moderator, John Blade, who I have the great pleasure today of actually introducing because we've worked together in a few roles at Hulu. He's now the current VP and head of sales at Premion, and just like to welcome the two of them to the stage and look forward to the discussion that we'll be having ahead of us. Take it away.
All right, Kinsey, it's great to see you. I used to see you in person. We don't see each other in person anymore, but I hope everything is good back east. And it's great to be on here. And yeah, I'm going to start podcasting in my free time, I think. I've got the setup. So Jason and I are going to, after this, we're just going to go pro. We're going to do this full time. So, well, it's good to be on with everybody. And, you know, I'll do a quick intro of myself and Jason in a minute, but the topic here is the future of TV and digital video. I want to thank Kinsey and the team of Brand Innovators. It's certainly very exciting to be here today on this live cast. And I do have a tremendous guest, and we were talking about this, and we decided that we would call this the life and times of a world-class beverage marketer, media planning, and perceptions around the future of TV and digital video. It just rolls right off the tongue, right, Jason?
Yep, perfect. Fits right on the business card.
Absolutely. So my name is John Blade, as Kinsey said. I'm the head of sales and vice president at Premion. Prior to Premion, I worked in a couple of network roles, NBC, Discovery primarily. Was early on in the early days at Hulu, so got a very good view of the industry. I've been fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time in a lot of parts of the business. And now I'm heading sales at Premion, which is the industry's leader in OTT and CTV advertising for marketers locally and also big brand marketers in the US. And the business has been building quite substantially over the last few years. And we appreciate how OTT and streaming has been growing. So with that said, though, more importantly, my guest today is Jason Mcgowpin. Jason and I have not known each other too long, but it's been great to get to know him in preparing for this. Jason is a graduate of the University of Maryland, where he played basketball. So we're going to get to the basketball piece a little bit later here. He also went to UNC Chapel Hill, I believe. So when he goes to school, it's all basketball. It's all about the ball. Jason is brand director at Vitamin Water. He has a very, very nice career progression to Coca-Cola, which includes managing the brand for Coke Zero and also Coca-Cola and Powerade. So anyway, Jason, thrilled to have you here. And why don't we get into it?
Awesome. Great to be here.
So let's set the stage a little bit. If you can give everyone a little peek inside what the day-to-day life of a brand director is these days, you're leading in a multi-billion-dollar company, and you're leading a brand that's hot. And I know that we had talked about not doing any shameless plugs.
Well done. Everything. But
for Vitamin Water. Yeah. Vitamin Water. Excellent.
There you go. That was really well done.
That wasn't planned. So let's get into it. What's the peak inside your day-to-day life these days? And then, we'll talk about the brand a little bit. I know we wanted to talk about media planning, media mix. We'll definitely get into TV and streaming and then some other questions. But what's the day-to-day like these days? What are your KPIs? What does the team look like? What are you focused on?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, if I could kind of boil my life down to, a sentence, is to essentially hit the annual revenue and profit goals for the brand and for $1 billion business. And that includes just about everything as you would expect. And whether it be working directly with the rest of the organization or within my team specifically. But, for even right now, we are working with our bottlers on how do we improve the downhill, which has been a tough year, but also make sure we get ready for next year, which would be an exciting year for the brand. How do we work with key retailers and key partners, the Walmarts and the Targets, and so on and so forth, on bringing together some of the activation that we have currently and also in the future. But also working with our scientists on innovations that we have, short and long-term innovations. Today, I spent quite a bit of time in working with what we call our internal IMC team, or kind of integrated marketing communications team, on how we're bringing to life the next year from a communication standpoint, and the media plan, the content plan, the campaign strategy, and kind of how all these things come together. And then right after this call, I've got time with our finance team to go through the latest on the P&L and how we're shaping up. If we have any gaps, if we're over delivering, what therefore would that plan be for the rest of the year to ensure we land on a high note. So it's really all encompassing, but ultimately doing what's necessary to hit our annual profit and revenue goals.
So as a marketer, you didn't think you'd be working with the scientists and the finance guys as closely at that early on, right?
Hey, listen, I love it whenever we get to talk ingredients and, GRAS studies and FDA approvals. I mean, I didn't think that'd be me, but I love it.
It's awesome. And it helps you become a better marketer. I mean, it's to know every aspect of the business, understand your margins, the cost of sale, cost of goods. So what are some of the growth imperatives for Vitamin Water? I know that things may have changed a little bit in 2020. Of course, we've had some other stuff going on. But what does it look like through the remainder of the year here and into 2021? How's that changed given our new normal as well?
Yeah, it's changed quite a bit. And I think part of what we'll, I'm sure, continue to talk through is what's going to be long-lasting change versus what's going to be more short-term change. I think the reality is that how we're incentivized and what we need to do from an annual perspective doesn't change all that much. We still have to overdrive the business. How? I think what we've learned is that we have to have a much healthier mix of e-commerce and other ways of delivering, make sure that the product is available for our customers. Retailers are very, very getting greater and greater capability in that regard, whether it be the Peapods or the Shipt of the world or the .coms of some of our greater retail partners. But we have to have much greater proficiency and prowess in ensuring an optimal e-com experience for our consumers and making sure that it's readily available, right? And it could be as simple as just search optimization, digital shelf, but ensuring that it's positioned as a solution. But I think is at the highest level, when you think about how the growth algorithm may have evolved, it's really, especially for the brand, it's really about reaching new people. And it's a very simple thing to say, but it can be a very difficult thing to do. Especially when there's so much noise in the market, and all airways are dominated by a couple of really big things that we could all kind of guess what they are. How do you portfolio, introduce the brand to people who have never tried it before, in a world where oftentimes you have to buy 6 or 12 in order to actually try it for the first time? But the growth algorithm moving forward is getting more people to bring more people into the portfolio.
Got it. Jason, did COVID accelerate the e-commerce focus for you guys in any way?
Absolutely. I mean, it's in many ways, COVID has changed certain behavior, but I think it's often accelerated existing behavior, and I think it's brought more people into the inevitable faster than ordinarily would have, right? So, they're a broad swath of the population that was already doing primarily most of their grocery shopping online, and having right. So it's not a new capability, but certainly now you have many, many, many more people over the past 6 months who have navigated to that, because simply they feel unsafe or not comfortable going into a traditional retail environment. And so that has to hurry up to get ready as well, ensuring that experience is optimal, that we have the right capabilities with our retailers as well. So yes, we're getting better. I'd say there's always room for improvement. But Vitamart in particular, our consumer is a little bit more digitally savvy, a little bit more digital native in nature. And so they're a little bit ahead of that curve. Yeah. The brand do a little bit better, but always more we can do.
Yeah, so we'll hit on that too. I want to learn more about the media mix and targeting. One other question from your brand experience: what have you drawn on from all of your experience of Powerade and Coca-Cola and Coke Zero? And I'm fortunate enough to have been inside the walls of Coca-Cola, and I know how precise things are with regard to strategy and tactics. So what do you take into the vitamin water experience and responsibility from maybe some more of the tried and true experiences of Coca-Cola and Coke Zero?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I'd say quite a bit. Every brand is so different. You wouldn't think so, but I mean, you think about a Powerade who's number 2 in the market. That then you're a challenger and you get to be a little bit of a fighter position. So you have more of an appetite to try things and experiment, because the chance of getting it wrong is controllable, right? During my days on Coke and Coke Zero, especially brand Coke, when you're clear market favorite with 130 plus years of equity, the reality of getting things wrong on that brand is a little bit different in terms of magnitude. Right. And then vitamin water, which, interesting enough, vitamin water is the market leader in this ingredient enhanced water category. So you would suggest that, okay, well, then you want to play a little bit more defense. But the reality is that we have a legacy of being non-traditional, a foundation for zigging while everyone else is zagging, right? Of being incredibly edgy and incredibly experiential and innovative. And so for us, we're going to continue to do that. But I would say that taking the spirit of Powerade and being a fighter and being a challenger with the responsibility of a Coke, of being a market leader, can come together in vitamin water in a way that you have aggressive plans, but a long-term view to your brand that delivers year over year over year growth at top line and bottom line. That's ultimately kind of what we have to do, is maintain that position, but do so aggressively.
Yeah. So down in Atlanta, over the vitamin water division, you fly a pirate flag up there, right? Because you guys are doing things very differently. But learning from the past, and and you have the ability to experiment in ways, I feel, as a consumer of vitamin water, that no one else does. I feel like you're constantly paying attention to consumer needs and maybe paying attention to the voice of the customer a little bit more, and have that flexibility. Is that the right assumption?
You're exactly right. And it can come to life in all kinds. I mean, the big thing is that we have to be consumer experts. We have to be able to talk that our consumers. And that's always been a part of the brand. In fact, I'll tell you what, I'm going to interview you for a minute. You have your vitamin water energy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What does the copy say on the back? Can you read it?
Well, my eyes are so bad, but it says energy and it tells me it has antioxidants and vitamins.
So turn it around, and there's bottle copy on that, right?
Oh yeah.
And it's actually the brand talking in colloquials and very plain lange in a way that only the consumer would get. Right, there you go.
Things to do with energy. Love it.
That's just, it's a little fun way of us bringing that personality, but it's all based on us being consumer experts. So we do a tremendous amount of research and tremendous amount of first person syndicated with our consumers, so we know what they care about, what's on their mind. So we have the right insights to be able to zig while everyone else is doing something that's very traditional.
All right, so let's talk about what you do with that creativity and that consumer connection coming out of Atlanta. What are your core marketing platforms these days?
When it comes to kind of the big vehicles that we use in connecting with consumers, it's what you would expect, but then it's a question of how do we use them, right? So, one thing that we'll talk about, the role of TV, certainly still going to be a big platform for us, right? And I think for a lot of reasons we can get into. But the role of social is taking on not only a greater importance, but how we leverage it and how we utilize it. But then you're going to have programmatic elements and display elements and integrations, which we'll talk more about. But I think also what we're getting better and better on is how do we find the contextual relevancy for all those marketing mediums? How do we utilize adjacencies to further unlock the message, right? We'll talk about those, but it's one thing we talk a lot about is video. Is TV going away? Not going away, but you're going to see a greater integration across all those additional platforms as we look to communicate a central message.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that because TV is definitely not going away. We will hit on that. Regarding your mix, how do you measure success in these environments? Obviously, you want to fish where the fish are, and we've talked about what consumers are important to you. But how do you measure success in those environments? And I'm super interested actually to geek out on programmatic in a minute here, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. And I'm happy to expand. It's funny. One of the things that we have really been trying to push ourselves on is there's always your reach and your frequency and how you kind of measure that. But one of the things that is core to who Vitamart is are you generating the talk value as well?
Yeah.
Right. And that may push you into some areas that may not have the best reach frequency play, but certainly get you into the conversation and in the way that you want. As an example, there was a line that the brand used many, many years ago that I can't take credit for, but I think it's just amazing. That was a couple lines. That was high impact boards in urban centers, especially in multicultural centers. And the line was OJ guilty, OJ guilty. And then the subline was of being high in sugar. And
super creative.
And then of course you show vitamin water rise, which is the orange juice flavored, right? But it's a great way. It wasn't a big out of home spot on the side of the highway, right? It wasn't as high impact as it is. But it generated a tremendous amount of conversation and the cultural relevancy of that time, because of course that was around the O.J. Simpson trial, generated that talk value. So I use that as an example to say there's always going to be your reach and your frequency and your sheer kind of massive reach that you want to get and bringing new people into the portfolio. But it's also how do you get people talking about the brand and drive that cultural relevancy again? Yeah, absolutely. The cultural relevancy, the fact that you guys have a sense of humor that matters, right? People can relate to. So I saw Coke was in the press this week with regard to a shift in the television strategy, if you will, a shift with a recognition of what's going on in streaming. How are you guys? I mean, the consumer is marching into streaming very, very quickly. I had someone I used to work for at Hulu who always used to say the parade is headed in our direction, and I feel that couldn't be any more true these days. But how is Coke and Vitamin Water specifically adjusting to this shift in viewing and consumerism and streaming? Well, it's a combination. First, you have to recognize that it is inevitable and the inherent challenges that exist when you're in a no ad environment, but that's increasingly where people are going to kind of subscription based, the Netflix and the Hulus of the world, et cetera, which all are great partners, by the way. So the question is, how do you do it? We'll I think more and more, and it's not just Coca-Cola, I think it's basically most kind of, especially heavy TV advertisers looking at integrations. How do you have organic integrations into some of these, some of the content and platforms, but in a way that still positions the ads as not taken away from the experience, and the brand as not taken away from the experience, but a bit more of a added value and an organic integration into some of that content. So I think you'll see us looking at more organic integrations in, certainly a place that we want to. It's where the consumers are, it's where our fans are, and where we want to continue to have a conversation with.
Yeah. So do you use your leverage to maybe get providers to do things that they normally wouldn't do, something exclusive to you, without revealing your strategy?
I would say in a mutually symbiotic way.
There we go. I like that.
And that's something that we would look to. But again, it's got to be done the right way. I think what and it's me personally, you never want to position your brand in the way. Right. There's always there's a great visual that we use. A guy at a baseball stadium, and he's sitting behind this giant pillar in the stands, and he really can't see the game that he wants to game. That's where you don't want your brand to be, right? It's a big portal through the content. You want your brand to be a more of a value add or utility to that, enhancement to that, right? As aspirational as that can be, that should be the aspiration. That's incredibly important to uphold as a clear value as you get into things like into some of these platforms that are a no ad type of space. So we'll keep that spirit as we look to evolve how we continue to be where the consumer is.
Yeah, absolutely. So media planning theory. Let's geek out a little bit on media planning theory. How do you plan for OTT, connected TV, digital video in its various forms, and linear at the same time? And it sounds like you've revealed a little bit of that change already, but how do you think about all three of these? And should we be thinking about them separately, or should we be thinking about it all the same? How do you think about it?
It's a good question. It's a bit it's a bit philosophical, where I think there's a lot of different opinions on it. I'll give you my opinion. It's probably not right. You ask 10 people, you'll probably get 8 different answers, right? But I'll just give you kind of my take on it. I think we should plan video neutral, right? I think the part of the challenge with that is the measurement across platforms, and the OTT to linear to XYZ. You end up getting incongruent reach and frequency measurements, given the nature of how you have to buy. So so the spirit is to buy video neutral. In actuality, there is a little bit of a click down you do inevitably when you have to have, to make sure that YouTube, has the reach frequency needed, versus because you can't measure it the same way you can kind of from a cable perspective. So, but that's the general philosophy when it comes to video, is to be video neutral, knowing that our consumers view video across all different platforms.
Right. Does ad load matter? Skippable, non-skippable? How do those factors enter the equation for you guys?
It's always a part of the equation, in that we want to be in places where there's some stickiness to it, where you can minimize the amount of kind of fraud, and you can minimize the amount of the kind of the skippableness of it, right? Or that we have the right content for it. But I think the other thing that I failed to mention is the power of the idea when we get into the planning as well. Because and some brands do it really, really well, right? Where there's a 3-second skippable, but they have 3-second content, and it works really, really well, right? The power of the idea is really important. I think that's something that is a true philosophy as well. Start with the salient of an idea that is truly liquid and can spread, and then let that drive you. I'll give you an example. And this is several years ago, so hopefully I'm not giving away anything, but we would do we had a squeezed vitamin water flavor. It was a lemonade flavor, right? And so we put a game around the flavor that was called Grandma's Big Hug. And the whole idea is that as Grandma squeeze, right, you would have this never-ending running game where Grandma would be running down the street, and if she finds someone, she gets to squeeze the person, give them a hug, and then she gets Well, with that idea, we actually made a game of it, by the way. It was pretty funny. But with that idea, then we bought media against the idea. Where outside of game conventions and adjacent, the right banners on the right, ad websites and the social adjacency, we kind of brought that through. So I say all that to say the importance of the idea is not a step you can miss when you get into the buying.
Yeah, that's important. And you and I had hit on this last week a little bit when we had talked about considerations around national versus local streaming and OTT and TV. So how are you parsing opportunities around national versus local? Has local become more important to you guys in the environment that we're in right now? And is that a permanent change? What's your take on all of that?
Yeah, national is always going to be very important, just because of Vitamin Water is $1 billion business, and so we have massive kind of drinkership and reach that must happen, right? And for the best programming, it's going to be national anyway. National is always going to have a role. There's I think, an ability at the local level to have a certain amount of relevancy that you just can't have at the national level. It's maybe difficult to execute at the national level. And I think both working need to happen, and they both need to happen at the same time. As an example, you might be able to have, and this is equity to Vitamin Water. Vitamin Water would run an ad back in 2000s about more protection than your doorman, right? Well, that makes a lot of sense in New York. Right? That makes no sense. Right? So the relevancy of local is really important, and that generates the authenticity, which I think is one of the key values that we have as a brand. But you need to have the national play in order to reinforce the central message and around the campaign. So I think it does have to be a bit of both.
Yeah, makes sense. Hey, let's shift gears for a minute here. We had talked about last week together the precision with which data comes into play with you guys. You guys are, is a very sophisticated company when it comes to making decisions on data. And what kind of role does data play in your business now? And how important is reporting to you and being able to granularize results and make results actionable in your media?
Yeah, my favorite saying, or maybe my second favorite saying, I got two favorite sayings. The one of them is, "In God we trust, everyone else bring data."
That's right.
that is a cornerstone for sure. And I think, Coca-Cola as a company, we're blessed to have a tremendous amount of data at our fingertips. So it is very, very important. We use quite a bit on the upfront, both in really dimensionalizing who the consumer is, how they consume media, right, with a certain amount of quantitative data around it. And then as we get into the plan, there's a great level of detail that we're able to get to, which is what will be our reach, what will be the frequency, what will be the frequency 1, 2, 3, amount of times, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then on the opposite side, through some proprietary methodology that we have, we're able to actually understand what the effectiveness of the buy was, and even compare versus what we had going in. So data is core to the entire process from beginning to end.
Got it. And then how does data inform creative efficacy, particularly in this environment, when you have truly bifurcated media platforms and different types of consumers in different places?
Yeah, I'd say that when it comes to the bigger pieces of a campaign like TV, we actually test that. And we put it in front of consumers, and we make sure that we're getting the core message out of it that we want. But I'd say when it comes to a lot of the creative media buying, I think we can be very, very specific in terms of data and measurement, et cetera, et cetera. When it comes to the creative message, though, there's an art and a science to that, right? And I think the science has to be there. We need to feel confident that for the most part, the message is being interpreted and received the right way, right? But there's also, how do you have someone rate something that they've never actually thought to think of in a certain way, right? It's almost like imagine a color that doesn't exist. And so there's a bit of art to that to match with the science. And I think that's important because us as Vitamin, we have to take risks. We have to keep pushing on things that really haven't been done. And if you rely on data to only prove those things, you may never actually chase that innovation. And so there's a bit of art.
That's a heck of a point too. And I found years ago when behavioral data was becoming such a big deal, people would pay for behavioral data on campaigns all over the place. And again, nothing against behavioral data. Anyone out there who's listening to us, behavioral data is amazing. But you get to a point the data can paralyze you and you lose your gut instinct on your brand and it doesn't become actionable. So I love to hear the fact that you're thinking about this as art and science. You're a true marketer, Jason. That's awesome. I've got some rapid fire questions for you for the end, but we've got a bunch of questions coming in through the chat. So let me take a couple of these questions here. First one is, how do you approach emerging media channels and how do they factor into your overall strategy? Now, this also sounds like someone who probably wants to get a meeting with you with an emerging media channel, but it's a great question and it's getting tougher to break through these days. So how do you approach emerging media channels and how do they factor into your overall strategy? Great question.
Yeah, it is a great question. And there's the downside of being such a data-driven organization is that it tends to push you to what's tried and true, what you know we're going to get a good return out of, right? And we know the ROI of every single lever that we have, or most levers that we have, the out of home, digital, socials, et cetera, et cetera. So then what falls out of that is, okay, well, what about these platforms that are new and a little bit unproven, they don't have an ROI against? And this is where I think it comes back into the art, right? Where, and that it may not be something candidly that we say, let's take, the millions of dollars that we have and put it against an unproven channel. But it may be one that, if we think about the relevant roles of all the mediums, what role can that play? Is there a way that we can test and learn and discover, right? And have a little bit of a stair-step approach. And then maybe if that pans out and we feel like we get the return and we reach who we needed to reach, that we have an elevated role moving forward. So it might end up being a little bit of a walk before you, crawl before you walk. But getting tight on the role that it plays in the broader media mix is a way we get started down that path.
Yeah, excellent. Prove the baby steps. And again, that's where someone will probably be welcome to see that pirate flag. That you're willing to take a risk on some emerging stuff, which is great.
Absolutely.
So another good questions come in. Many brands have drastically reduced media budgets over the past few months. Yes. How has your media plan adjusted? If your budget has been reduced, have you gotten more creative and efficient with your strategies? Great question.
Another great question. A lot of media budgets have been reduced for a lot of different reasons as well, right? And so if you think about it, and you guys all live this, you're March 2nd, 3rd, right? Maybe even a little bit, late February. You got a great spot showing people outside. They're running through the grass. Maybe they're stopping by the mall. They're enjoying with a group of friends, and all of a sudden, social distance hit. A lot of times it's like, no, we didn't plan to reduce the budget. We don't have any content to run anymore, right?
Great point. Yeah, great point. Great screech on the creative. Yeah,
it's exactly right. So there's that. Then there's also, hey, there was a murder of George Floyd, which had sparked awareness of systemic and racism within the U.S.
Yeah.
How does your spot now look in adjacent to that? There's a contextualness of your creative, given the dynamic and everything that was going on in the world, which impacted the budgets, right? At the same time, and I'm sure everyone saw this, Coca-Cola went on a very public halt of social media as we evaluated the policies of our partners in light of all of those things. So there was a hold of the budget from that perspective as well. And then there's a general, in a pandemic, how do you reach the people in the way that they want to be reached, in the way that they're consuming media, which may not be kind of the mass cable, but it may be in a different way. So it's a long way of saying there's a lot of different reasons why budgets are reduced. I think what you'll see more from us moving forward is how do we appropriately prioritize the channels that are directly connected to e-com, while still having the mass vehicles like video that can still drive the heavy equity lifting.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning also the pausing and the reflection around social responsibility and what's going on civilly across the United States. It's important, and I, for one, like you, believe that social media platforms in particular have a responsibility around this. So, as brands continue to push against that and consumers continue to push against that, we'll get better platforms, hopefully. All right, another question. This is changing gears completely. How has your leadership style changed over the past few months? Have you been able to develop more personal relationships with your colleagues and partners? That's a great question.
Yeah, excellent question. The leadership has had to change quite a bit. When you don't have the water cooler moments, not that Coca-Cola has any water coolers for obvious reasons, but the Coca-Cola vending moments, right? You don't have those. It's tough to check in with people. It's tough to just chat about the weekend. It's tough to, just have an face-to-face conversation. What happened in that first month is that people started feeling really isolated. They felt disconnected. If you weren't in the existing work stream, then you never saw somebody, right? The other thing that happened is that every meeting got extremely transactional. There was no meeting outside the meeting or walking to go to the next meeting to kind of catch the flavor of the weekend or the day. So what I've done is stand up actually more what I'm calling water cooler moments, right? Actual structural meetings in the calendar, or carving out time in existing meetings so that we're not going to talk about anything other than what's going on right now, right? How you doing? How you feeling, right? Especially in the midst of some of the social unrest. We would have dedicated meetings just to talk and to listen and to make sure people feel heard and to facilitate that kind of interconnectedness that is so lacking right now. So I think the short answer is a heightened awareness of the needs of the individual, and then therefore creating the space for people to still try to, as best possible, replicate that in-office experience.
Got it. Makes sense. All right, here's another one. Working from home and distancing have altered consumer media and digital habits in many ways. What are you seeing when it comes to those types of behavioral changes, and how are they adapting? How are you adapting?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of again, acceleration of some of those trends, and it's a couple that we haven't talked about that I think is going to be pretty fun. One is the obvious. I mean, binging that's happening right now. Like people are like fourth rung deep into Netflix shows that they might not have gotten to kind of with being in the office, right? So there's that trend around some of the platforms that I think is real and will only continue. But there's something really fun that's happening. If you think kind of future state, right? That how they're consuming video. People are increasingly consuming video through different screens as well. Yeah. So yes, your cell phone is taking more and more of a kind of a video role. The Apple Watch is taking more and more of a video role. I saw a stat. I can't recite it now, but I saw a stat around like the increasing prevalence of refrigerators that have TVs. That's awesome. So it's been kind of fun how video has been popping up in different parts of a person's home, and so therefore, how do you get the brand kind of integrated in those areas? Which I don't, TBD and what the solution looks like there. Yeah. But there's just kind of this proliferation of screens that is also, I think, accelerated with COVID and stay at home as well. So all kind of things we're thinking about and considering. Yeah, there's a statement. What is it? The Internet of Things. Now we've got maybe the video of things, right? Right. Exactly. So I've got one more question for you, and then we'll get into rapid fire. I think we've got a few minutes here. Election 2020. I told you I'd ask you this if we had time. Sure. Vitamin Water. Are you taking a brand approach, a brand position with regard to election 2020? Are you guys rocking the vote or staying away from it, or how and why or why not? Yeah, we're going to back one candidate. And I'm just kidding. No, we're not going to do that. Right, exactly. Sure. There you go. No, I think the election, this election in particular, I think is going to be a tricky one for a brand to engage in a way that doesn't get the brand wrapped up in some of kind of the toxicity and the nastiness that's going to exist, right? If you think about Vitamin Water is a brand that's always kind of been left of center. We're a brand that is a bit subversive in nature, right? Again, we see someone else's zag, we see what other people don't, and so can you bring that to life within this election cycle? There is a way, and that's as far as I'm going to go, is to say there is a way. Yeah. It's got to be done in a way that is authentic, in a way that doesn't distract people from a very important topic, and that adds, right? And that does not therefore leave the brand vulnerable to kind of nastiness that may exist. So I'll leave it at that. But there's a way, but it's one that I think all brands are going to have to make individual decisions on.
So related to that, I won't press you too hard on this, but related to that, is this a focus group moment for you guys? Is this a time when you collect a lot of data to keep checking down if you guys are okay with this? Or because as we've been talking about, things change so quickly.
Yeah, it's probably a combination of art and science again on this one. But it's also the scale of what we may do. So for example, if we decided that we're going to put a TV spot out there that has vitamin water ice, which is blue, and vitamin water power C, which is red, right, and coming together with some type of message. By the way, I just made that up, so don't think that's.
By the way, that's not bad, actually.
But if we do something like that, right, that might. I mean, there's a message of unifying and it's all mixing together, yada yada. We might test that because we're putting millions of dollars against it. If we do something that's a little bit more conversational with our consumers via some certain channels, right, and social media, et cetera, that may be one that we leverage a collective genius. We might do some light work, focus group work, but that may be one that we look at, see how traction conversations are generating, and then adjust on a daily to weekly basis, right? So it depends on the scale and the magnitude that dictates how much we go kind of test and action with consumers.
Yeah. Well, listen, we used to be able to say, I'd like to buy the world of Coke and hand it to somebody, right? Anybody. Why not put a red and blue vitamin water together? I think that's,
this is what the world needs right now.
Exactly. Let's get it. I don't know what it looks like. It's purple. I have no idea, but it's a great idea. Yep. So let's do this. I think we've got like a minute left here. So I want to ask you some rapid fire questions that have nothing to do with anything we've talked about today. All right. Cool. So, Jason, best concert you've ever seen in your life?
Man, I don't go to a lot of concerts. I'd say I'll go back to, oh God, I may be dating myself here. 8 years ago now, the last kind of real concert I've been to. That's not good to admit. It was the Jay-Z, Kanye West Watch the Throne concert. And that was about 8 years ago. Wow.
That's a throwdown. All right. What kills you most about quarantine and social distancing? Real fast.
Oof. Not being able to eat out more.
Yeah. I hear you. Okay. How many days a week do you wear shorts to work? Now, you're a former ball player, so how many days a week shorts?
Shorts or sweatpants is 100% of the time.
Yeah, I know it. All right. Final question. NCAA men's basketball. Does the season go all the way? And who holds the title at the end? And don't feel compelled to say my Baylor Bears, who are ranked #1 right now.
We're not very compelled to say that. I think the season goes all the way. I don't think there's going to be any fans. And I think the University of National Champions, the University of North Carolina is going to be holding the championship at the end.
All right, Tar Heels. Jason, man, awesome. Love you, man. I want to do this again sometime, and we've got a lot more to talk about. Kinsey, I see you back in the studio.
I'm here.
Back to you. Good to see you guys today.
When this world gets back together again, we need to get you to some concerts down there. That's on my to-do list. Well, thanks, guys. This was awesome. Love the discussion. It sounds like, the shifting for the future for Coca-Cola and vitamin water is, going to be in constant change for you guys. It's really based on the art and science of media buying and planning, and looking at the world that we're in today, the promise of tomorrow, and then also the challenges that we're faced with being at home and the societal issues that are going on. Coke, you obviously have a lot of work cut out. So thank you for taking the time today to join us. And I will shift gears to go into our next session. For that session, we have a great panel discussion, and we're joined by Rick Hack, who's the head of media and entertainment partnerships for Intel. Rick operates as the liaison for the U.S. M&E companies, pursuing transformation, tech-based partnerships, and strategic relationships. Rick is joined by Ted Shilowitz. He is a futurist. That's a great title. From Paramount Pictures, Ted works with studio leadership and technology teams at Paramount and Viacom, CBS, exploring forms of new and emerging technologies with an emphasis on virtual and mixed reality. So welcome, Rick and Ted. Looking forward to on discussion. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having us. You know, as much as Ted and I are on, we were invited to conferences. I don't think we've ever actually been. Oh, yeah, we actually was last year, the first time. I was going to say, I didn't think we had done this before, but we had done it once before at the Infinity Festival. So it's great. Great to be back with you in the firing zone.
Well, I'm a little unbuttoned there. I think I got to button up for the video chat. Okay.
Wow, look at you. We both dressed up.
Yeah.
So is it us just kind of hosting this call, or are we going to be asked questions by the host?
I'm instinctively guessing that it might just be you and me, because I just see a thing that says brand innovators in the middle. So
okay,
perhaps it's just us.
We'll just do it ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay. So should we tell them about our latest and greatest program together?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess, like anything, it always starts with a story, right? So this story goes back in the fact that you and I are friends and colleagues and have been dancing the tech dance as it relates to the entertainment field together for many years. You with Intel and me with a number of different movie studios, and before that being involved in the sort of enabling technology for creative people, building movie cameras and tools that allowed more democratization of the business at large that we participate in. And I guess this is a couple months ago now, you called me up and you said, we're working on an idea in response to the pandemic to actually start to tap into some funding that Intel has to see if we can help on some of the challenges related to remote learning and the way that students, especially in public schools, were having more and more difficulty with the traditional forms of the extended Zoom video chat school day, and they needed more tools and more resources for the teachers and the students and the administration to start to tackle those problems and find some unique, innovative ways to help students engage more in learning. So that was your nickel pitch to me, and I said, you had me at hello. Public school, and how can we help? And we're a giant media organization, and let's see what we can do together. So very quickly, we started crafting some ideas that I took all the way to the top to our organization, our parent organization, Viacom CBS, and said, our friends at Intel want to put this together. I think we should help. No one had any objections, and we started down this road, which then sort of evolved pretty quickly into what we determined should be a series of effectively virtual career day sessions, but done in the fashion that we're doing this right now, right? So that it was very authentic. It was very sort of low production value, high touch, high intimacy, high real story. And we started recording these video sessions via a video chat client and preparing them to give to LAUSD for their teachers to deliver to their students in a series we just call What I Do for a Living. And it focuses initially on the entertainment business, which is quite broad and goes through lots of different touch points. But the initial idea, which I thought was interesting and everybody was on board with, was to try and focus not so much on the very obvious jobs that everyone knows exist in the entertainment industry, like producers and directors and actors and cameramen, but to focus on how broad this industry is and how many jobs are out there that a lot of the students wouldn't even know existed, but might be very valid career paths for them. So that's what we started doing, and we started building a whole series of them.
Right. Yeah. So I guess it was back in March or April, Intel came up with this PRTI, Pandemic Relief Technology Innovation Fund, $50 million dedicated to education, dedicated to health and science. And I was approached by a couple people that said, hey, look, you work really closely with these entertainment partners. In fact, one guy in particular said, hey, can we just get Harry Potter to read a story to these kids? Because my kid is just dying, And I don't think he knew who Daniel Radcliffe was. But I said, look, and so I started to build a framework around this. And me not really coming from the educational space or having that expertise, but really from the media entertainment and technology side, I roped in one of my colleagues, Daryl Stewart, who might be on the line today. I wanted to give him a shout out and said, I've got this framework of an idea. I'm thinking about this masterclass concept and thinking about what kids want to be when they grow up and thinking about that idea in general. You coined the term "what I do for a living," which we obviously love because we're taking that on. But really, it was that broader idea of introducing themselves to and doing it in a way, in a really authentic way. I think we talked about this slick production concept, and we thought about what we're doing right now and breaking down the barriers of having something that's not so overly slick, not so overly produced, something that really speaks to these students would really break through to them and having them introduce themselves, share their career path, tell them how they got there, what do they do in the day's work at a very high level. And like you said, it's not about the actors and the people that get all the glory in Hollywood. It's a broader idea about game designers and really looking at all the aspects of STEAM and how that could be applicable to the entertainment business. But then on top of that, the other piece that I brought to the table and we brought to the table was we said, how about we gamify this? How about we create an incentive to the students that for each class that they watch, they get some type of reward. And initially starting off with an idea around a meme or something that's digitally tangible, something that's easily delivered. Yep. And then we talked about, wow, can we deliver these money can't buy experiences where a student, you have these amazing brands, the Viacom, CBS, obviously CBS, Paramount. When you think about Awesomeness TV, MTV, Noggin, and Nickelodeon, you think about all these incredible brands that can really reach a student. What if we're able to deliver some money can't buy or connection to that individual that's providing the class, or even an actor or a producer, director? Can they visit a class or a student and spend time with them and help them with their thought about what they want to do in the future? And obviously, we're going to get through this pandemic. We'll get through it at some point, but so let them think about what they're going to do in the future. And I think that was a really important step. And identifying LAUSD, because we got the statistics for LAUSD, and I think a lot of people will be surprised to hear this, but 15%, or maybe not, 15% of those students in LAUSD were not even signing on at the time. And we started this conversation back in May, I think, and this was reflective of the spring semester. But 30% were not regularly checking in. And what I found out about education, if you didn't know already as well, is that the educational system, the schools are funded by the government based on attendance. So if we can increase engagement, and we know that this remote learning or blended learning, however that's going to be seen fit, it's going to continue in the future and it's continuing now. So if we can up the amount of people that engage, we can up the attendance, we can help impact education.
Right. Yeah, and considering this is a conference for people studying brand and the power of brand, I think it's interesting. This is sort of the first time I've really discussed this sort of verbalized, but it's interesting that you mentioned that we came up with the name of, we'll just call it What I Do for a Living, which was kind of what if we just take the most obvious approach to what we're doing here, right? We had a couple of more sparky, cheeky, kind of creative names and concepts, but at the end of the day, they didn't really clearly define as quickly and cleanly as just say what we're actually doing, right? We're building these series of videos to show people all the unique careers that we participate in and all our friends participate in that might be valid career paths for these students. So what if we just call it What I Do for a Living? And that's kind of, and it stuck, right? We put a nice little logo to that and it worked. It makes me reflect all the way back a number of sort of career path moments ago when I was helping with Apple build a special device to move professional video signals in and out of the computer. which is oddly enough in this very heady sort of part of like what we're doing right now and what everybody on the planet does right now. That had to start somewhere, and we were working with a team from Apple to create that technology, and we built this specialized hardware box, and we had all kinds of really fun names for it. And at the end of the day, I looked around at the whole team and I'm like, well, what does it actually do? It brings video in and then spits it out the other side. So what if we just call it the I/O box, because that's what it is? And everybody was like, that's a good idea. And that's what stuck. And everybody for years knew it and talked about this product and kind of its category as, oh, it's an I/O box. That's what it does. Like, so it's just interesting from a brand perspective that this goes all the way back to a touch point from years ago where we were trying to outsmart ourselves, and then ultimately we realized we should just call it what it is, and that seemed to work. Maybe that's an interesting message for people that touch the brand world a little bit.
That's a great point, Ted. Now I found that great that you talk about the brand side. I'd like to also mention the technology side. You know, when you think about as these students are going to be digesting this content, the more that we iterate, the more that we create this type of content on their behalf with these different sessions, and we're calling them subject matter experts. We will get the data analytics from those views. How long did they watch? And I think the other important piece of this, and which we're really excited about, right, is the fact that this is going to be integrated into the curriculum. So not only are we creating this new content that's engaging, that could resonate with frequently understood brands like SpongeBob and you know, these individuals that you have coming on board, which are, you know, you've got creative producers coming over from Nickelodeon. I think there is a SpongeBob designer or animator that's going to be involved. And then beyond that, we've got the Dodgers that came calling and said, hey, we'd be a part of this. So I think we've got something here. You know, it's starting to snowball a little bit.
There's traction starting to happen even before it's really publicly known what we're doing. You were able to bring in your friends from the Dodgers, and they're involved, and they're going to talk about some of the careers kind of hidden underneath the baseball organization that some of the students could look at. And as part of the Viacom CBS initiatives on the pro bono side, we support a music initiative called Save the Music. And they reached out to us from some other press that came out of this innovation discussion, and they said they'd like to help and bring some of the music side of music careers that some of the students might not know about. Again, not the really exposed stuff, but some of the stuff that is sort of deeper inside the business of running a music production, or just the business at large of music. So things are starting to open up. We also have a couple years ago, Viacom purchased a conference that focuses on what I would just simply call the YouTube generation, called VidCon. And we just did a session with the head of VidCon to talk about youth culture and the careers that kids could get into as it relates to modern social video and viral video, which a lot of kids do all day long, but probably didn't realize there are a lot of valuable career paths for them that are tied into that. So it's just an interesting little piece of the puzzle of what a guy with a very strange job like me gets to do, that just has the liberty to say yes to things, right? To explore things that may not be directly in my wheelhouse of, well, this is what you do as a futurist. This doesn't really directly relate, at least this part, what we talked about so far, to what I do as a futurist. But the other part of this, which we're just starting to develop, and in fact, I just reached out to the principal of that school that is probably more focused on innovation and technology than some of the other LAUSD schools, to be our pilot program. Something that you and I discussed and we were very excited about, and Intel at large and Viacom at large was excited about, was looking at the future of video tools and video systems to create different types of remote learning that'll be more engaging and more interesting than just a video screen. So we're starting to look at virtual reality and mixed reality devices, which today are exotic and expensive and hard to access for kids. But if you believe in the future like we do, technology changes, and the tools that most kids have now, a smartphone and maybe some sort of computer or tablet, a VR or mixed reality device is going to be just as commonplace as that in the next 5 to 10 years and just as cost effective. So
Right.
we're going to start working on that now as a pilot program to experiment with teachers and small groups of students to demonstrate the future of remote education. Because while we all have an anticipation that we are going to be smart enough and savvy enough to get this pandemic under control in ways that we can now handle it and start to move forward with our lives in some degree of normalcy, that's certainly the belief. This is likely not the last very drastic issue that we're going to have to deal with in some way, shape, or form, right? So being prepared for the next one is not a terrible idea, and we should start now. We often reflect on the fact that 25, 30 years of people working on video chat in some way, shape, or form, whether that's WebEx or Skype or Zoom or now Microsoft Teams and Zoom and FaceTime, et cetera, that wasn't just a reaction to this that it's all worked. It's been working for a long time. And the ability for us to be able to do this at scale so seamlessly and across so many different devices with such degree of quality of interop speaks a lot to foresight, right? And certainly your company had a lot to do with that because you provided a lot of the chips for those things to do what they're doing. In fact, the ones that we're on right now are powered by your gear, right?
So I'm going to give you $20 after this meeting.
But it's, it's just, it gets sort of lost in the shuffle. People just make an assumption that all this was just there and no one had to work on this. A lot of people had to work on this, toiling away for years and years and years and years and years before it had the relevance that it did over the last 3 to 4 months, right? And the relevance moving forward is going to be exponentially higher because people are more comfortable doing it. I mean, think about how many traditional phone calls you do today versus these kinds of video chat. And this is a worldwide phenomenon, right? So we can look at lots of different silver linings around what has happened with the pandemic, the loss of life, and of course the worldwide drama of this is a horrible thing. But there are a lot of things you can look at that come out of it that present themselves and point to the fact that technology helped us get through this. Really interesting to me. Anyway.
Well, it's funny, you were pointing to, when we talked about this in the subject matter experts that you were going to provide, obviously within the entertainment industry, but you said, hey, what about Intel? How about Intel or other partners? Let's look inside to see who we have that can tell this story. And so we've got a couple executives in the AI space and machine learning space, also in our enterprise cloud space. One of my peers, and actually who I report to, and she's going to do a tremendous job. So, and then you talked about sitting in the middle of a data center, and you're pointing to all the different servers and say, you see those lights right there? You see those lights that are lighting up there in the data center? Those weren't there like last month before the pandemic. And all the things that just, like you said, just naturally work.
All this stuff doesn't just happen, right? I mean, someone has to make it happen. Like the fact that we haven't dropped our connection 12 times, which when I started doing video chat 12 years ago, it was, we'd talk for about 90 seconds and then it would stop and it would break and it would stop and it would break. And yeah. Now it's fairly stable. It's not perfect, but it's fairly stable. And when you consider the amount of human beings doing it on the planet on effectively home networks now, right? Not even commercial networks, because most commercial businesses and offices are closed. So people are using their home internet speed to pull these little tricks off. I think it is, people don't think about it. People probably a lot in this group focus on the front end of what it takes to do this stuff, but they forget about the back end and what a big deal the back end is to even enable the front end, right? To enable a branding touch or a marketing touch on something. None of it happens without the back end. It's often ignored. So
yeah, I would say, you give me a call if you want to talk about your back end, but maybe that's a little inappropriate.
maybe for another day.
Looks like you've got some backup systems there behind you as well. So I think
I have more.
You've got a generator in your house, I'm sure.
I have so much gear around me. It's sort of terrifying. I've got VR systems, AR systems. Just in this little side office alone, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 computer devices in here. 10 computer devices in here. There's another 12 of them out there, right? So I lead a very interesting sort of technologically driven life, that's for sure.
Well, getting us back on topic, I'm sure we're going to be getting questions pretty soon, but I think the one exciting part of this program too is, in addition to what we learn as a result of what we're doing with LAUSD and us,
Yep.
and you, is how this potentially could scale into other markets around the country. And so
Yeah.
hopefully, I know we have I'm sure we have a national audience, but that is something I absolutely hope we can explore, with other brands that would want to participate. I think we've always been open to that idea, and also, other partners, but, looking at other types of markets, because we're in LA, because we think about entertainment so much. That's what we focused on first here, but I think we could obviously use this. It's in a controlled environment. We've housed this content in a controlled environment, and that would also stick with whatever schools we're going to work with. But I think if we go to another market like Chicago, like New York, can we broaden that idea around ideas of fintech or other areas that are important to those marketplaces that seemed to be obvious in addition to entertainment?
Yeah, I mean, we started with entertainment just because that's what we do for a living, but clearly we've already opened it up to the tech side with Intel. And if anybody that's on this and watching it says, I'd love to be involved in this, they can reach out to us on email. We can provide our details, and we'd love to have as many people that feel like they can add something to the equation and bring it to other school systems, take it nationally, help us with funding, help us with strategic, resources. The sky's the limit with something like this. It starts at a good place, and hopefully it continues to be at a good place.
Yeah, and we talked about earlier in regards to the rewards and the gamification of it. Intel, and I know we have to define this further, but Intel is going to be providing some type of internships as a result of how these students participate in these classes, and not just based on the fact that they've watched the classes or engaged with those classes, but I think this will be a little bit more merit-based. So how do we integrate with that curriculum and then understand what students rise to the top, and then reward them with an internship from Intel?
Yeah.
I think
And on our side,
and at some point you'll figure that out. Yeah.
Yeah, on our side, because we have this giant entertainment organization, we have lots of ways to incentivize kids with things that are well out of just a prize sort of structure, but something that is something money can't buy, right? Like, a way to connect with a celebrity, a way in times that are not like this, being able to take them to the movie studio to see filming, or to see a special screening of a movie in one of our theaters privately, or, to go to one of our late night talk shows, or to meet one of our late night talk show hosts, or to go to a sporting event, right? Because CBS is part of our organization. So there's sort of unlimited ways we can tap into this over time. We're just a little bit restricted because we don't really do in-person things these days. But that doesn't mean we can't figure it out with technology, right? And just in the way that you and I are talking, we can have a celebrity have a 10 or 15 minute catch up with a class as an incentive, right? Which is only 10 or 15 minutes of a celebrity's time on a Zoom or a FaceTime video chat for a group of students. So these are things we're looking at to help sort of get them excited about watching the content. And then there's a lot of discussion about how do we follow up, right? What is the continuing learning, or the CE, continuing education part of, once you've watched the video, I want to learn more about it. How do you get more resources? How do you start training for that career? So what we've already done in the process of building these little learning pods is we realize that if we break them into two 15-minute sections, we do like an intro section that all the students watch. And then for the students that are like, that's really cool. Like we interviewed one of our heads of finance at the movie studio, which you would think, oh, that's like finance. Who wants to do that? But there's a lot of kids that are really interested in math and numbers, and that's their passion, right? And so we brought someone who's in the entertainment industry that does math and numbers and works in a really cool job with like famous people and people that in the numbers part of our business, right? So first part's the overview. Second part is a deep dive, and she opens up an Excel spreadsheet on the screen share and shows what it looks like, and how do we do project planning for a movie and budget all this stuff and decide what's successful and important, and where do we spend the money to see the return on the money, and all these things that we know a certain portion of students would be absolutely fascinated by. And then they can do the deep dive session, and then they can do a continued education learning material that we can start to build and cultivate with some partners. So there's a lot to this. We're just getting started, but there's a lot to it.
No, I really get it. It really does. It really does go to that STEAM aspect of it. It really does encompass all those elements of what you think about when it comes to STEAM. And the one of the things I thought was really interesting, and you think about all these high-level positions, like you said, you think about the finance, and I think you have Bob Bucci is going to be one of those classes. Like you mentioned, Save the Music, and you've got the production angle with the arts. So what I thought was really interesting too is that you even went down to the most basic level, which was about breaking into the business and having a production assistant. Like, how do I actually get into this world?
Right.
And I thought that was a great idea to think about something as soon as you get out of high school, what could I do, like, for starters, and even thinking about the future. Yes, but this is a way to break right into it.
Yeah, and it's important to us too. We need to let people know these jobs are out there. Like, if nobody knows about them, who's going to try and apply for them, right? So we need to. It benefits us as well to, like, get the word out to our organization. And what's been great so far is that I think we've done maybe 10 of them so far. Over the course of the year, we'll probably do 30 or 40. I would think at least 3 or 4 of them are like kind of what I would call homebrew, right? They come from LAUSD. Some come from at-risk neighborhoods. They didn't have all of the like, this is going to be an easy road. They had a difficult road, and they found their way, and they went through a public school system. They asked a lot of questions. They got a lot of mentorship. They got a lot of people to help them along their way. And then they found their career in the entertainment business. So we actually have 3 or 4 stories that I think will resonate so much with kids that maybe are at-risk populations or lower income or more challenged in some ways, that, like, sometimes feel like that's great, but, like, I'm never going to be able to get that, right? But here's someone that did get that and that came from your similar background. Like, they're you. Like, they look like you, they think like you, they talk like you. They are you, and they are heading up an animation show at Nickelodeon right now. A big job.
And he's a minority. So I love the diverse aspect of this too. Like, it's males, female, it's different ethnicities. It's just such a great, it's such a wide swath of, which I think is the makeup when you look at LAUSD, or look in general, but LAUSD in particular. It's,
well, you can see we're passionate and proud of it.
yeah.
And we're just getting going. So who the hell knows what's going to happen in the future, but it's all coming together nicely.
So what else should we talk about?
I don't know. I'm not sure how do they ask. Are people able to ask questions? I think we kind of covered what we're doing.
Yeah, a little bit. Maybe we're done a little bit early, unless you want to speak. I know we spoke a little bit about the future of how innovation in education, and we talked about virtual. We a couple of years ago we had done this as well with a company called Sansar, if you remember. I think they've since gone a different way, but virtual learning, and what we have done also with the Smithsonian in discovering how those virtual visits to different locations all over the world, and also with your avatar, or with somebody else in that same environment, you virtually going to those locations.
Yeah.
I think the democratization of these devices will come down, has already begun to come down, but we'll get to a point where it will be accessible to hopefully, like you said, the next version of this. God forbid we ever have to face something like this again, but we might have to. And I think this will be what we've seen when in our conversations, my conversations with Daryl, our education lead. It's something that is going to go on. A percentage of these classes will continue to exist in a remote or blended way.
Sure. Yeah. I think there's no reason to expect that things go back to the way they were, right? When things modify, people take the benefits and the learnings of those modifications and they apply them into their daily existence. And I think school is no exception to that. I mean, my daughter's at university now. They're doing a blended learning where she's in her dorm, but she's doing mostly remote, except for she studies culinary. She's a chef. So her cooking labs are in person with special social distancing and masks and shields and all the safety protocols in place. But everything else is, while she's on campus, she's doing this. And this ain't gonna last forever. Like, we have to figure out a way to evolve this because we have the tools, we have the technology, and we have the desire that people are gonna want this. So it looks like Kinsey's coming in.
Kinsey, you want to say?
Hi, I'm back.
Hey,
So
talk over you.
Thank you guys. Oh my gosh, that was great. And it's funny that you mentioned, your daughter. I'm home right now. I have 3 kids that continually come. I'm hiding in my den, the bar behind me, and they keep running in and out. So this hybrid world, it is a challenge, but we all thank you for the efforts that both your companies are making. That is a testament to the creativity that we need to do in order to engage students in the way that we are. So kudos to you both and your companies for supporting it. We do have some questions live in the Peanut Gallery. So I will provide you guys some. I guess I can just direct them to whichever of you wants to respond. But the first one we have is what trends in consumer behavior are of particular importance to you and marketers now?
Well, from my standpoint, it's, I guess you could call it a trend. I would say authenticity is the order of the day. And people suss out things that are not the real deal really quickly. They are revolting against slick, and they are leaning into real. So a really good example of that is something that I imagine a lot of your audience members have had a chance to watch on YouTube. It was John Krasinski's Some Good News, which if you hadn't had a chance to watch it, it was, to me, the most authentic way to look at a challenge and try and bring your particular breed of talents and skills to the table. It was lovely. And every single episode I watched, I was just fully in tears because of how real and authentic it was. And you could argue, yeah, but he's a big star and, they have resources and so forth and so on. But the way they did it was sort of anti-resource, right? He just kind of did it in his house with his lovely wife, who's also a movie star, and his kids made the logo, and everything about it worked, right? And now our organization, Viacom CBS, takes the mantle of making sure that as we evolve it, because we picked it up and it's going to be a show in and of itself on major network television, it's really, really important that it maintains those same tenets of authenticity, and it doesn't become too slick, and it doesn't lose the essence of what it was, right? In that period of time of the pandemic, as now we're in the longer stretch part of the period of the time of the pandemic. So I think maybe that's a good example, and I would imagine a lot of the folks that touch brand and focus on brand success, to me, the top of the list is authenticity. Is regardless of what you're doing, make sure it's authentic, make sure it's real, and you really believe it, and you're not doing something you don't actually believe in.
Yeah, I think that's why we took the path that we did with the kind of content that we're creating right now. Makes so much sense.
Well, it's funny, it actually segues. The next question was, knowing brand purpose and authenticity. You mentioned that in reference to authenticity. How does that approach your marketing? So you just basically explained how you guys as a company, it does play out in how you market, you go to market. So that's really important. I have another question. It's kind of similar to what Jason was posed with, is how does your leadership style, maybe this is a good one for you, Rick, is how does your leadership style changed over the past few months? Have you been able to develop more personal relationships with your partners and then also with colleagues, knowing that you guys are actually working to solve a lot of the stuff that we're facing today? So maybe how does that work within internally, how you've been operating?
Yeah, it's obviously it's been a strong challenge, and I think every conversation, if you're meeting somebody for the first time, we usually dedicate 5-10 minutes of that call just to go through, just to have a conversation, a really just understanding of what they're dealing with, versus talking about business, and that's generally been my approach, and even just talking to colleagues that I haven't spoken to in a long time. I mean, especially in California. There's just so much going on out here with the fires and everything else. And I know the markets are a little different in terms of what, even movie theaters in other markets are open versus where we're sitting in California. So my approach in my discussions, I would say more, it's just dealing with what's real. And you can't overlook that, but it's been tough. I'm a remote, what they call a remote employee. So I'm based in LA. I work from home, but I'm so used to being on the road. So having this situation where everything I do is through a screen is super challenging. So we do try to think about ways, and we have been, and this outreach with this pandemic fund has allowed us to have that conversation of how we can help other people's businesses. And we're doing that with a couple other companies as well within the entertainment space, and obviously with what we're doing with TED.
That's great. And you mentioned California. So with the fires and obviously what you guys are doing with your initiative, education, are there any other markets, or if there are, what are those markets that you guys are thinking to scale what I do for a living in?
I mean, LAUSD is the second biggest district in the country. It would be amazing to look at New York. I mean, we have a wonderful relationship with New York. It'd be amazing to look at in some markets in Texas, San Francisco. I mean, you just look at the market sizes, and I think if we can nail those markets, then I think it continues to proliferate. But go ahead, Ted. I don't know if you have thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think, for me, it's going to be looking at what are the challenges of the really, really large school districts, the medium-sized school districts, and the smaller, more rural school districts, right? Because in many ways they all have the same challenges, right? But in many ways they have to deal with them and function with them extraordinarily differently, right? A big school district is more of a bureaucratic organization because you're just the scale and scope of it is so big that it's hard to do things on a one-to-one level. A small rural school system, you can sort of attack things quicker with smaller amount of students, smaller amount of teachers. But at the end of the day, the tenets of it are the same, right? Is like if your kids cannot go back in person safely, how do we make this as motivating as possible for them to stay in a school environment and feel like they're getting something valuable out of it? And how do we bring our penchant for technology and learning and innovation to this pool? Like, what can we do, again, that's authentic and real for us because this is our area of expertise? How do we benefit those students by what we happen to know? And so that's what we're going to hopefully do together.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I think we are closing out in time. Appreciate the discussion, professionally and here very personally to all of us as we are all working from home, juggling life, everything, and education of our children is obviously of the utmost importance. So we thank you, and thank you to all the speakers today. I think that we had a lot to take from it, very insightful conversation. And I will also plug for the next Brand Innovators Livecast, which is tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. Please tune in. It's on cultural marketing, building relevance with the modern consumer, and we'll be joining by marketing leadership from Jib Jab, Heineken, Hennessy, PepsiCo, Los Angeles Rams, and SAP. So thank you all for joining us today. I had a great time emceeing. Hope I'll be invited back again. And everyone have a good short week.